Hey, thanks so much for finding the video. Do us a favor. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. Be sure to leave your comment. We love to interact. Enjoy the video. We all know the Saints presently are in a situation where they are in the neighborhood of, Larry, you correct me if I'm wrong, but $60-ish million over the cap still after alleviating about $30 million in cap space with Drew Brees and Nick Easton?
I'm looking closer to 70. So that was my calculation as you gave me my homework to do, and that was where I am. And it didn't even take into account the players that they want to re-sign or try to sign. And I'll just tell you, maybe I'm just a very conservative general manager, but I never got under the cap, so I think I'd be fired.
Okay.
I got to about 10 million over the cap.
Oh, wow.
10 million.
Okay.
And it's a lot. Like, it is a lot.
So, you know what we'll use, Larry? Spotrac has the Saints estimated cap space right now, as with the top 51, by the way, as $65.5 million over the cap. If you go to the entire roster, they have it at 70.7. So let's use the top 51, and you got to eliminate $65.5 million. Where are you starting?
Quan Alexander, he's set to go.
Okay.
He will save you about $13 million, maybe a little bit over $13 million. Look, maybe if you want him back, you do something, but you cut him right there, and then you sign him back later and if you want him back.
Okay.
I would release Patrick Robinson. He would save you about $2.6 million. That would get you, all right, judging by their cap, that would get you to about $50 million over the cap.
Mm-hmm.
I would restructure Andres Pete and shift some base salary into prorated bonus. And I feel like I'm being conservative here. I feel like I could save $6 million this year on Pete.
Okay.
Maybe I could do more. Like, I'm not doing a lot of voidable years because I think that's a tactic they're going to have to use. I'm not totally familiar with how many times you can do voidable years. So I'm just saying I could save $6 million on Pete if I restructured Teron Armstead using basically the same method. He does have 2 voidable years in the back of his contract. I'd add a little more money there. I'd save another 6 there. So let's call that me getting to about $36 million over.
Okay.
Then I would extend Ryan Ramczyk and Marshawn Lattimore. This is probably conservative. I feel like I could save $11 million total by extending them. I could probably save more, but then, of course, I'm just pushing more money back.
Right.
So you would have a really low first-year base salary, and all the money would come later. They'd get cash up front. Then a lot of people who've done this exercise want to cut Malcolm Brown, and he would save you about $5 million. I don't want to cut him. I want to extend him because I still think he's young enough. Nose tackle, you'd miss him if he was gone, and he's not some big salary, but I feel like I can extend him and save another $3 million. So that would get me to about $22 million. Some people want to cut Janoris Jenkins. I want to cut him. Who's going to replace him? And if you cut him, you save $7 million, but you eat 7.2. To me, that doesn't make sense. I would try to throw in another year, maybe an avoidable year, maybe doing that. I feel like I can save 4 or 5 off of Janoris Jenkins' deal, which he's a $14 million cap. I'd like to get him down to about 9 or 8. So doing the math there, I would get to about 18. Morstead, I would release him. He would save you $2.5 million. And then I would restructure Michael Thomas. I'd probably save $4 or $5 million there, just adding more money to the bonuses and dropping base salary. Emmanuel Sanders, you might want to give him a voidable year, and you could save a couple million there. So, you see where I'm getting at. I've got to do all of these moves, and I'm not even signing a player yet. So I don't think I'm cutting as deep as I need to in some of these areas. That just goes to show you what you want to talk about re-signing Jameis Winston. You want to talk about re-signing Trey Hendrickson or Marcus Williams. You got to get to the cap to even get there. Like I said, I'd be fired as a GM because I'm just being too conservative. So it's a tall task to say the least.
Let's run through some of this. So first of all, the Quan answer is obvious. He's not going to be back at $13 million. Would you like him back?
I don't know. Healthy. Look, it's kind of a similar situation like Phil Alonso. They brought him in to try to replace Alex Anzalone, and then he gets injured, and then you cut him. Same thing with Quan Alexander. So I don't think there's going to be a huge market for Quan Alexander because he's been hurt a ton. He's hopped around teams. If you can get any players you can get back on a minimal deal, you will try because it doesn't count that much against the cap because you're talking top 51. It will just bump other people down, and it's maybe a couple $1,000s here or there. So, that's you'd probably like him back, but I don't know if he's going to be healthy enough, and he's going to be nowhere near $13 million. You have to be like $1 million in my mind.
Yeah. Saints general manager Larry Holder's with us. Now, you also mentioned P-Rob. You mentioned re-signing, extending Lattimore, and then you mentioned also sort of restructuring Janoris Jenkins. At some point, do you consider, because Larry, I think in round one, I want the Saints to go cornerback. I think Janoris Jenkins needs to be gone and quite possibly Robinson as well. And you go corner opposite Lattimore in round one. What do you see them doing there?
That makes sense to me. It also makes sense to me if they go safety in round one and let Marcus Williams walk. And safety actually is a pretty good position in this draft. And, if you're not re-signing Marcus Williams, that's probably the route you'd go. And they've done this time and time again. I mean, Marcus Williams was brought in as a rookie and started right away. I mean, they did this with Von Bell, Malcolm Jenkins. They drafted Roman Harper. So I'm more hesitant to say re-sign Marcus Williams, but I like where you're thinking there. I could see them cutting Janoris Jenkins, but to me, I still think he was a good player, but you're not necessarily in thinking win now mode. So maybe you move on from him and have a younger corner. So look, I think that is a route they could certainly take because from the free agent market at cornerback, I am not in love with at all. I think it's very shallow and the top part is not even that good in the first place.
Now, you also mentioned 3 offensive linemen. You mentioned restructuring Andres Pete and Teron Armstead and then signing Ryan Ramczyk to an extension and backloading the contract. Of those 3, I'd say which is most likely to not be back, but I think I know the answer, which is obviously would be Teron Armstead. What would the option be for New Orleans if Teron Armstead didn't return next year?
I think you've got too much money tied to him to not have him back. It doesn't help you. I think it hinders you. I don't have that number right in front of me, how much, the difference. I don't think this would be the time to let Teron Armstead walk. Maybe you try to trade him. I don't know the scenarios there, but I still think they want him on the team. And so, that's the problem they're facing too. They've got a lot of good players, but somebody's going to have to go somewhere to make this work. And if you're looking at somebody, he would probably be the one with the least tied to him just because Andres Pete just signed last year. Ryan Ramczyk, you can make that deal work for you for many, many years. I mean, but I just don't see any of them walking. I think they made their offensive line move, and that's to cut Nick Easton, and you saved about $6 million by doing that.
It just doesn't feel like that's going to be enough. So what about the possibility of moving Ruiz to his natural position at center, McCoy playing guard? You've got Ramczyk at right tackle, and you've got Pete at left guard, and then you draft an offensive lineman 28th overall to be your left tackle. By the way, Armstead, his cap hit is $16 million. The dead cap number is 9.6, so you'd save about $5.5 million.
Is that enough to do that for a player that you really like and really invested in? I think that's going to be – look, these are the decisions they got to figure out. And so, you could also move Pete to tackle. I mean, and if you drafted an interior lineman and go with the best guy available, I do think Ruiz moves to center and McCoy moves to guard. I do think that is what they're going to do. But look, I mean, I'm not going to discount any kind of veteran that you might not see coming to be something happen. Like they're just in that position where go all in. You got too much money. Something's got to give. So I just me. If you're me, you're asking me to be the GM. I don't want to cut Armstead yet. I just don't. But where do I go from there? It's almost like, do I also turn and say, hey, let me give Taysom Hill another 2 years and send a bunch of money? It's all this. Latavius Murray, you cut him and you could save about $3 million and go with young Johnny Jackson. So, Emmanuel Sanders, what do you do with him? There's so many scenarios you got to go through. I mean, it's, I'm not going to say I'm a layman, but I'm definitely not. I'm not running a team, so I'm trying my best, and I'm having a hard time getting there because, like I said, I feel like I'm being conservative. Maybe you can't be conservative in this point.
Whenever we look at this, and the point of this exercise was to prove just how difficult this is going to be, right? I mean,
right.
I think we've all hesitated to call this thing a total rebuild because of all the talent that they have in place. I mean, they got all pros at almost every level on both sides of the ball. Is this going to turn out being a total rebuild?
I don't think yet. I think it becomes that if Jameis bombs out. I think you got to give it a year where they might not be 11-5, they might be 9-7, and you're missing some pieces. So I don't. It can't be a total rebuild. Like you said, when you've got so many all-pro players, it's not a rebuild. I mean, you'd have to shed all those. Like I'd say it was more of a rebuild from 2013 and to 2014 when you're having to let a bunch of veteran guys go, even though they were aging. It still was like a culture shock. Like I don't think you're having a culture shock, even though Drew Brees is leaving. You're not having a culture shock in every position group where you're losing so many notable people who've done so many great things for you. I don't think they're there yet. Now, maybe next year, like I said, if Jameis bombs out, what do you do? I mean, then you're just starting over with the quarterback and you got to figure this thing out.
Yeah. And, of course, the rebuild came through the draft and primarily that 2017 draft class and some notable free agents. And now they sort of lack draft assets, which makes this even more complex. He is Saints general manager, Larry Holder, and he's got the bank account to prove it. Appreciate the time, man. Thanks for joining us.
Quick tease, I have a column tomorrow about whether Marcus Davenport is or is not a bust, and if that class is a bust. We're 3 years in.
Okay.
Check it out tomorrow, theathletic.com/New Orleans.
And forgive me for not mentioning that earlier, theathletic.com/New Orleans, and follow him on Twitter @Larry Holder. Thank you, Larry.
Bye, buddy.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.